because I couldn't be here.
So anyway, so I decided to do this conference or this day event or panel speaker, whatever you want to call it, is because I became an executor of a friend's estate, and it was totally unexpected. And he died very quickly, and we never had enough time to discuss. I only knew about two wishes he wanted, and that was one where he wanted his ashes to be spread, number one. And number two was what to do with his cats, because he had prized, expensive cats. And that's the only thing I knew. And so I said, oh, but before you go, I need to know this and this and this. And he said, oh, well, Marilyn, you're smart. You'll figure it all out. It'll be a Easter egg hunt. And, okay, I've learned a lot doing this experience. However, I don't really wish it on anybody else to have to go through what I went through and not knowing anything. I mean, the only thing I knew was I went through his phone and started calling people, telling everybody that he's passed. And then you could tell by the mail that was coming in, which bills he had, and notifying them, and all that stuff. And then of course he has two companies, and unfortunately that's still an ongoing battle because they won't allow me to have access to his business accounts at the bank because my name isn't on the articles of incorporation. And so it's all that stuff. That's the part I still have to work on and get that handled. And when you really don't know, and I've talked to lawyers and they said, oh, you shouldn't have to do that, and you should just do that, and all these other things. So my friend that passed away is a very small estate. He's not large. He didn't own any property, but if he did, that would be like another on top of that. I would probably just say to the state, you take it, but I've learned a lot. And now I just thought, after going through this experience, and I have a will, like I told my friend, I'm healthy and I have a will, but you never know what's going to happen, right? And just because we're only 20 doesn't mean that we don't need one. So anyway, so that's why I decided that, more people need to know why they need to create their living documents, or I call it a playbook or whatever, is so that we all understand that. Because I think with the COVID, it brought it up so much more. One of the gals I know who was didn't didn't want to be on the conference, but she just shared some experiences that where she lost 4 clients. She was an insurance rep, and she lost 4 clients. None of them had wills, and some of them didn't even have insurance. And she said the whole families are in a mess. They're all fighting amongst each other, trying to guess what that parent or person wanted, and their and their final wishes. And so it's kind of become a little passion project for myself to say that we really need to look at, you know, our paperwork. And so most of the guest people are the speakers, and they all know what I'm talking about. So anyway, so that's why I decided to just like, let's try to get some people that are in the field and get them to talk about why we need to consider all this stuff. And so yeah, so I'm so happy that you all came, and we're going to go ahead with this and just have some fun. And please do ask your questions. The chat box is open for anybody who likes to introduce themselves or ask a question. So, and type of thing. So anybody have questions so far? Or
Hi, Marilyn, it's Janelle. I apologize for the background. I'm driving.
okay.
I just want to check in. Can you give us a little bit of idea about the flow of, the morning and kind of how you see things, and then also, did you want us to share stories, or you kind of have an agenda that we're going to go through?
Well, I have some speakers, but there's certainly lots of room to share your stories and your experiences and questions. Yes, absolutely. I want it to be very interactive. We have 5 presenters today. And so it's more of a busier afternoon than this morning. So the first person was supposed to be me, just to give us, I wasn't going to, I just took in the space just to open up the space. So I just wanted to just talk of why I decided to put this thing together. And so the first speaker will be Ron, and then there's Jeanette, and then let's see, just let me get the rest of the speaker. Tanya speaking today. I did pull up the schedule of speakers. I am okay. There we go. So it's Ron, then there's Jeanette, and then there's a lunch break, or we can just continue to network share our stories and ask questions. And then at 1 o'clock is Tom Nelson. 2 o'clock is Tanya. I'm not even gonna pronounce your last name, Tanya. I'm sorry. And then there's Don Mulford. He's the last speaker of the day. And so everybody's just going to talk about their expertise about why we need to consider doing our end of life paperwork. And I don't know, I'm struggling.
Okay, and then we were gonna run.
Pardon me?
I was checking. You're planning to run until 3 o'clock?
Yeah, about 3 o'clock. Yeah, 3. Well, the last speaker starts at
Thank
3,
you.
so 3 to 4, I guess that would be it. So that's the lay of the land today.
Thank you.
So you can jump in and out, whatever you feel that you want to jump in and out. I know it's a long day, and not everybody wants to sit in front of the computer for that long. I get it. So anyway, so Ron, do you want to start, or do you want to say anything, or does anybody have any comments or suggestions?
Well, if I may, I just want to thank you for putting this together, Mary Lynn. It's such an important topic. I'm extremely thankful for you to putting this together and just getting the education out there.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people they delay thinking about it. They don't want to think about it, and then they don't plan. And then it just made the situation so much more worse than it didn't have to be.
Right.
It's already stressful enough dealing with the loss of a loved one, and then to deal with all the rest of the stuff that comes with it. I'm just so glad that you're putting this together and putting all the speakers, inviting people here just to learn a little bit more. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was going to say, as you were talking about COVID, is, I posted something like this on my Facebook page, and just an idea that, what do you think of this? Or a roommate calls me the wish master, and I'm like, well, okay, wish master of what, So anyway, I just said, what do you think of this idea? And one of the guys said, well, why do I have to do my will? And so I just said, well, and I said to him, his wife has COVID. She's in the hospital right now. And, I met her, and, she's a really, really, really nice gal. And so they have a private page that he updates everybody that's concerned about them. And, he said to me, well, why should I fill out the paperwork? And I just put in brackets, I said, I don't wish COVID on anybody. I've never had it, but I don't wish anybody having it. And so I said, because of COVID, I think it's brought more attention to have your paperwork done. And he just kind of just said, but why? Can I wait? And I says, well, if you or anybody that has COVID, and that person doesn't have a will, and that means each person has their own will or paperwork in place, then their wishes are not likely to be fulfilled. And, I think it's, just from what I've heard in my experience and what people have been telling me, is that even if the couple is married, it's not necessarily it's going to go from wife to husband. it could go to wife to kids, or somebody else can contest that and say, hey, we're her sisters, we should get what she has, not you. So I think you still have to have that paperwork, even if it's just to write it down and, you know, say, this is what I want. And when you're sick in the hospital, you're not likely, she's not coherent. She's in and out of coma. She's in and out of what's going on and where am I to, so she's not going to be in that space and filling out her paperwork when she's in distress. So why wait till you're in distress to write out the paperwork, you know, or do something? So, you know, anybody could do a will. It's just when it gets to be a little more tricky, when you have properties, you have other things going on, you have children, then you want to seek out a lawyer like a Jeanette and ask her, okay, what else do I need to have? And what should I really be doing besides just a will? Maybe it's doing your trust and things like that. And there's so many other things out there too. There's, you got health directives you got to consider. Do you want to be resuscitated? If you don't, then you have to have a pink sheet of paper on your fridge. So when the ambulance people come, says, do not resuscitate, they won't, because otherwise they will, because that's their job. So, you know, there's all these considerations that, you know, and then you're working with hospice people, they'll tell you different things that you need to do and that type of thing. So it's not just a simple piece of paper of a will, but it's all the other little things that you have to have written. And that's why I really think that should be part of a EA program or something else, so that more people, like Jeanette said, that needs to know about it and why it's so important. So, do you have any other questions, Janelle, about the thing, the program? And it's okay if you drop off in and out, that's okay. So anyway.
Mary Lynn,
Yes.
this is Tanya.
Yes, Tanya.
Hi, I forget if you mentioned that the first speaker is at 10 o'clock following your time, kind of opening this up. Because I am wondering, and if others are okay with this, I would love to start, and I can go now because I also have work, like regular work and patients, and kind of being given permission to just take this time, and also echo what Jeanette said and others, that this is
well, if you want to start now, you would have until 10 o'clock when Ron comes on.
Okay, I can do that. I also want to switch to my laptop, and I have a slide deck.
Okay,
so I'll just take 5 minutes or less. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is that everybody okay with that, Ron?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Because he starts at 10. I gotta honor his time too.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, because I'm a Canadian, I got my sister to do the paperwork, send in the money, and then they call me and say, oh, but you're living in the States, you have to pay more. I was trying to avoid that, but it didn't work. So that's what the call was about this morning, to update that. So anyway, so I guess Tanya will get started. And
Marilyn is asking me to have you let me in.
Oh, okay, here we go. You're in. And I will make you a co-host. Oh, where'd you go? Okay, so you're a co-host. Did you get that?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
There
so
we are.
excited.
You got it? You're a co-host now?
What?
I just made you co-host.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and share and do whatever you want to do. If you just Ben.
Yay. And let's see. Hopefully, I am going from, there we go. I've only used Google Slides for presentation once before, so, and is everyone able to see this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, I want to be able to make it as a slide view if I can. How's everyone's morning?
Good.
Good. I know. I mean, I do this every day, and so most of us on this, this is my passion and my expertise, and I also am just grateful, as Jeanette mentioned, that Mary Lynn put this together and recognized the need. And from the little bit that I know about your story and the time frame in which you went from friend to executor to facilitator and host, incredibly remarkable, because I have seen people try to put things like this together, and I know what it takes. So
yeah.
Kudos to you. All right, well, I'm gonna start. My name is Tanya, and I am a nurse practitioner, as well as the creator of Enlightened Aging. And as a nurse practitioner, I specialize in geriatrics and palliative care. And I have done this with the combination of my education, working in hospice, working as a palliative care nurse practitioner. It has been it's been 14 years this year. And it's been a privilege. And I know I got into this when talking about difficult subjects and having these difficult conversations and using the words, end of life or palliative care were even less glamorous, right? And less ideal and more jarring. And so I've definitely appreciated how much I've learned from people like other speakers in this room and how much I've learned from my patients and families. And it is their knowledge and what I've been able to reflect on that I'm using to talk about what I'm going to explain more of. And that is, so first I'm going to talk about some basic terminology. I think both Mary Lynn and Jeanette and Janelle mentioned that sometimes the misconceptions around terminology are the first things that create more fear and more delay and more hesitation. And so often in my role, when I'm asked to speak with people about their medical conditions and what they might expect of them in the future and the impact on their life, I will first go to clarifying misconceptions. And I feel like starting there helps to lower anxiety and open up a conversation so that we are talking about living. And that's my favorite part of all this, right? Is that we get to talk about you and what matters, because you matter. You showed up today, right? You could choose to be anywhere else. You could be at a coffee shop with your friends as things are reopening. Most of you have families and maybe going to jobs, working from home, and you chose to be here. And in this way of you showing up is the same way that you are demonstrating for your friends and your families and your loved ones how you show up and how you can help them to show up in their lives and talk about difficult decisions. And that's my decision-making approach. And then as Mary Lynn touched upon, I do have what is called physician orders for life-sustaining treatments. I have those conversations every day. In my 12 years, I've had over 100 conversations, maybe way more than that actually. And I will be sharing just the outline of that. And of course, then, if you want to know more, if you know people who need support in these areas, then I will be offering opportunities for working with me. So let's get started. Palliative care, okay? Palliative care, and that's my background, that's my training, is specialized medical care for people with serious illnesses. And we hear the word serious and automatically it enforces like, oh, we just don't talk about this. Well, the amazing gift of palliative care and the willingness to engage with it earlier is me and my team and other teams in many settings, many healthcare settings, we help to provide patients with relief from the symptoms, from the pain, from the stress of having the illness. And so often what happens when people receive a diagnosis and they're experiencing any level of a chronic condition and the impact on their life is it's not until it's gotten so extreme or out of control or results in a hospitalization that we start to ask the questions like, what is most important? If this changes the course of your life and makes it harder for you to do the things that you enjoy, right? The things that make our lives worth living, the things that we wake up for every day. If these conditions get so bad, because they can and they do, they get so bad that you feel like you can't go on like that. Oftentimes that's when we start having the conversations that we really could benefit from having at the time of diagnosis. And the goal is to improve quality of life, right? There's a lot of evidence that shows that earlier palliative care helps people live longer and better. And those of us in our room, those of us who've had friends and family, and we can talk more about COVID specifically, but I mean, just any one of us who have been close with somebody with a serious illness, cancers, dementia, end-stage dementia, and all the things that go along with that, lung disease, people who go to dialysis, uncontrolled blood pressure, so many different things that if we've lived long enough, the people in our lives are experiencing difficult things. And palliative care helps to improve the quality of your life for both the person with the illness and their family. But you cannot make a decision, right? You cannot be expected to make a decision if you do not have all the facts, or you do not know why you are making the decision. And most importantly, if you do not feel heard and empowered. So I will go into more detail about what I mean by that. And I actually have a model of decision making that is my personal branding. It is something that I've designed and put together. That is my signature decision making model. But if you are watching this, or if you are going to take this information to friends, family, loved ones, spiritual communities, even your wellness communities, something that everyone needs to hear is that they are heard and that no matter what they're saying, it's safe. Because as Marilyn mentioned, the families who are in distress and the families who are fighting are often, they're not fighting about what's right in front of them. And they're not actually fighting about the loss and the grief. They're fighting through it. They're fighting around it. And it's created just another layer on top of things that have probably been going on for a long time. And it's really hard when you're grieving and in pain to have logical conversations and to have authentic conversations where you're not overshadowed by your way, your voice, your truth, and making that more powerful than the truth and the opinion and the voice of everyone else who's also in this situation with you. I'm going to pause because I do want this to be my bigger screen. I don't know what view you're seeing. If anyone is more savvy with Google Slides.
We can see the full screen. We can see it.
Thank you. That makes me feel better. Thank you. On my screen, I just see my view. How's that a perfect illustration of what I just said, right? It's my view. So life-sustaining treatments. This term is often put forth, and I frequently see it misrepresented. And I understand, and of course, this is a very polarizing topic, right? But if you're here, again, you're showing up, you're willing to have the difficult conversations. I think it's important to ground in the fact that life-sustaining is exactly as it sounds. You have a condition where perhaps your life is changing, perhaps you're declining. You or your loved one may not be living the life that they even recognize themselves in. And they are constantly giving and constantly trying to survive without necessarily living better. And all of these treatment options, they are only brought into consideration when the condition is such that your own body is not doing the work for itself. Okay, so I'm saying that as a broad overview, and each of these topics, I have given 1 hour talks on each of these individually. So you can imagine, right, there's a lot of information. But one thing is I'm offering a free gift at the end, and it is a guide that illustrates each of these in fairly significant detail. And also, if you find yourself in this situation or you know people who have been presented with these options, but perhaps haven't been presented with the why not to choose them, or how to make the decision in the context of what it's going to do for function, for well-being, for quality of life, for longevity with purpose, then they can talk to me or someone like myself. So some of you might have heard the book Being Mortal, or maybe you've had these conversations with your own providers. And there are also many other books. Another amazing book by Dr. Jessica Zitter, who wrote Measuring, oh gosh, I'm going to have to get back to you with the name, but the concept in the book is how much we go into a revolving door system and a conveyor belt. And the reason, going back to Marilyn's initial question, why anybody would not want to delay having conversations, communicating wishes, and documenting them is because you don't want to end up on the conveyor belt without people knowing. Rain says, I'm a big fan of Being Mortal, absolutely. You don't want to end up on the conveyor belt with your friends and family speculating about what makes you you. Again, all of you matter. All of you are here for a purpose. All of you do things that are valuable and worthy and memorable and that make you the amazing and unique individuals that you are. And the reason to have these conversations is not because you're trying to talk about what's after or being forgotten or how people are going to remember you when you pass. It's so that you continue to remind people how you want to be treated, how you want to be respected, and what you value yourself for. And I can tell you that sometimes it's only in having those conversations that you even start to see yourself differently. And it's extremely powerful. Because, again, in my 15 years, I've mostly worked with aging and older adults who have lived in nursing homes or not been able to take care of themselves or usually require assistance in multiple areas of their life. And as I go through my career and think about what matters and what I value and bringing purpose, I continue to expand who I reach. And those are older adults still living with purpose and value through their conditions. People like your friends and family. So this is just one framework. And I will always ask, the first question I ask after asking what matters most, how can I help you make your medical decisions, is what have you been told? What do you understand? Because what I have seen and what I know, and if any of you have been on the receiving end of bad news or in the room with someone who gets it, right? The moment it is mentioned, whatever the condition may be, again, we use cancer as an example, but I've had a lot of people where COVID accelerated dementia last year, and it was awful. And I had more conversations about the fact that dementia can be a terminal diagnosis. I've had that more times last year than I have probably in 10 years combined. And that just tells you the magnitude of this. Same thing about kidney disease and other chronic conditions. I know the moment you hear that and when you're living with it, we tend to tune out. And we tune out because we are trying to preserve ourselves, because we might need to, because absolutely it is scary. What we can't control is scary. What we don't know is unsettling. So I always ask, and it doesn't have to be prognosis, just what do you know? What do you want to know? What are your personal goals? This is my favorite, and I'm going to tell you why. So I had a woman, actually probably a little over a year ago. She passed, and I was taking care of her. I was her primary care provider for about 6 years. And she had chronic lung disease and in the end needed oxygen. And she also struggled with schizophrenia and quite a few other conditions that were affecting her function. And she also had chronic pain, chronic kidney disease. But this woman was an advocate. And every time I saw her, she had packets and packets and packets of paper of letters that she was writing to the president, letters that she was writing to Congress. And I kid you not, she could be on my schedule because her blood pressure wasn't controlled or because of fatigue. But what she wanted to talk about and frequently directed me towards was, Tanya, I hear you. I know where this is headed. Yeah, I don't have great days, but help me finish my writings, right? Help me tell my story. And if I can't, I need you to. And God knows I haven't lived up to that, right? But the point being is she often changed her mind about her post decisions. She did end up in the hospital 3 times in the last 6 months of her life. But she was always surrounded by her family and her son. And her son had previously been in jail. And he was able to connect with her. And if I constantly kept the focus on, you're here because your blood pressure is out of control, I need to adjust your medications, you know you're 1 step away from dialysis, why can't you wear your oxygen? I would have missed the opportunity. That she was an illustration of how many of you and how many people in our lives, when they're living with these things, are powerful. And that was just one example, her personal goal. And she's just so remarkable. You know, what are you willing to give up? Sometimes we don't realize that the choices we make mean in the short term, we go through more medical visits. We go through more diagnostic imaging. We go through more blood tests, which could mean time away from family. It could be time away from friends. It could be time away from your purpose and your service. But that's okay if that is your value. And same thing with your fears and worries. They are valid. And what I've learned, because I used to be a lot more private in my life and not talk about the things that I was going through until after the situation had passed and I had learned the lesson and I had resolved it, right? Very, very independent minded. But I missed the fact that the more I shared was how others then felt comfortable, right? Comfortable saying, oh yeah, you know, I had a time when I was really sick and I didn't talk about it. Or I went through a really rough situation in a relationship and it took everything out of me. And I'm just using those as examples, but they exist in every aspect of our life. And if you take anything away from this talk and this session, it's that the way that you're approaching decision-making about end of life, having difficult conversations, documenting your wishes is likely the same way that you're showing up with decision-making in every other aspect of your life. Okay. So I use this slide because I understand that sometimes when we approach these conversations about life, it's very hard and it can be intangible, right? I hear this every day, you know, I'm okay because my perspective of my patients is different, right? What I know about their conditions is different. And it doesn't mean that it's you know, maybe I have a bias, but they're frequently teaching me that through their life and through their suffering, their self-perception is they're okay. So it's very hard to conceive of, would I want life support? Do I need a feeding tube? Do I want to, you know, be resuscitated? So I put it in the context of what is the thing that is keeping you from living your fullest life right now? And the thing about COVID is I think it has allowed more of us to be vulnerable with each other and to be open and to not have it figured out. I don't have it all figured out every day. And these are more tangible examples that you can use when you're talking with your providers, when you're talking with your families about the things that in the moment may take energy and effort and well-being out of you on a daily basis. And those are the things as life progresses and as you're just continuing to make the best of each day, these are the things: pain, fatigue, headaches and lung problems. I did see a lot more conditions accelerated last year. I do personally know I've even stopped being able to count the number of people who have died from COVID, both personally and professionally, and the ones who are being confronted with the fact that they've been fine for so many years. And then this just comes out. Memory problems, COVID brain is real. And I think sometimes even that we may make light of, but it is real. And I understand from the perspective of someone who might feel like this is affecting them, that it is something that we need to talk about. And diabetes and kidney disease. So I know this image is really small, and my point is not to take too much time to illustrate it. It's just another visual on how many opportunities there could be to talk about your wishes, to talk about what matters, okay? I'll give the overview is that the first one is cancer. And that, although we have advanced the science and the treatments and the interventions, and we have made it where people can live better with it, unfortunately, the time frame and the impact of it is still the same. And I've seen this twice in the last 2 weeks. Someone's going through treatment for a year, they're okay, we're managing their pain, we're managing their appetite, we're managing their nausea, we're managing their fatigue, so they can do what matters most, which is be with their family. But in the last 2 weeks, that drop off happens, and I've seen it. It's also why I requested to speak earlier this morning so that I can go be with a family later today who, as hard as it is to say, and it never gets easier, right? This visual, this pathway hasn't changed. And so if you find yourself in this situation, if you are the decision maker for a loved one, if this is you, it's not meant to raise anxiety or to make you more afraid or to add to your reasons to avoid it. It's meant to give you the information, because then you can at least be conscious about your decision if you are delaying it for a reason. And the next one, and I think this is even more imperative, because as we know, with our aging population, well, the second and third highest cause of death is heart disease and lung disease. And unfortunately, what happens is when people live with this long enough, 15, 20 years, they have periods where they get worse and they get better. So it never seems like it's going to just completely change your life or rob you of how you live every day. But the truth is, and what this illustration towards the very end tail, towards the right side, where you see the flat, with a little bit of a sloping angle and then the dwindling path down, is that we wait until you're at that flat slope. And that's usually when I've seen someone who's had, 2, 3 hospitalizations with long lengths of stay in a span of a year. And then I get a palliative consult. And I recognize that, oh my gosh, what happened 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Where were we in that span, right? We're just thinking things are fine. We're thinking things are okay. But we know enough now, right? There's no secret to how these conditions affect your lives. There's so much information. But if you're not afraid to be with it, you can actually be empowered by it. And if you're not afraid to be with it, you can be empowered by it. And the last one is a picture when people have progressive dementias. progressive neurologic disorders, Lou Gehrig's disease, multiple sclerosis. Okay. So this is what I'm most excited about. And this is really the core of my coaching and of my business and helping people through decisions. Because what I know about decision making is we have two ways of approaching it. We approach it with fear. And this isn't just about health and wellness and life and death. This is everything. Finances, relationships, our purpose, our service, right? Travel. I'm either afraid to lose something, I'm afraid to give up something, I'm afraid to be misunderstood, I'm afraid that someone will never forgive me or I won't forgive myself. And then there's the reframe. It's not easy. It takes work. I continually am reminded of this every day. And the thing with this is, it is normal to be afraid, but to stay in it is going to keep you stuck. And it brings us back to the original point, is that if you stay in fear is when you and your families miss out on the time to have healthier conversations, more vulnerable conversations, conversations where there's trust and love at the center of it, and where we're bigger than ourselves. So, and I don't see any questions, and I know I have like 5 minutes. Are there any before I share? And if it's okay with you, and I mentioned that my business is Enlightened Aging, and I created it for caregivers and caregivers of people, you know, often it's adult children. And some of my clients recently, in fact, I work even more so with adult children who are geographically separated from their parents. So they're not physically providing the care. Yes, Ivy raised your hand. Yeah. Do you have a question?
I just want to say, you're doing a wonderful job explaining all this, and it's good to know this and hearing it from you. She's my niece.
Thank you.
It is so good. I didn't know all this, and it's good to hear and learn from you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Keep it up.
Very humbling from people who've lived a lot of this, right?
Hi, Tanya. This is Janelle. I just wanted to chime in if you don't mind.
Sure.
So my head is spinning a little bit. Like, obviously the awareness that you've provided is helpful, but I guess I'm still unclear on like how you support, like what is that tangible thing that you do? So in my circumstance, we're still in the grieving process from losing my dad and him not having what he needed. And my mom is the survivor and me as the adult child trying to support her. I'm not sure how I would engage with you and how you could support.
Of course. Well, one, I mean, my heart's with you and just so much compassion and gentleness. You know, I can only imagine what that looks like and everything you're experiencing. And I would love to talk with you. You can, and thank you. That's a perfect segue for Janelle and anyone else, is the work doesn't stop. With me, it doesn't necessarily stop at someone's passing, right? Transitions and grief, I think, is the thing that brings us back full circle. And Mary Lynn had a beautiful post, I think last week, that said, death is the ending of life, but not relationships. And forgive me if I misphrased that. But when I read that, it just resonated so much. And I think that's exactly where you are now. And you can book with me at enlightenedaging.org. I have free 30-minute sessions. And in that 30 minutes, at the least, I can give you, as you mentioned, one tangible piece of advice or a resource. And we can always talk more about how I may support you. I have grief packages, I have perspective packages. It's just something that I would love to go deeper and support you. And so Janelle, to answer your question, at enlightenedaging.org, you can send me a message and schedule a free 30-minute session. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that's partly why we're all here, is because hearing examples like Janelle's, and I'm going to cry saying it, is like exactly what we don't want people to go through. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it's what Mary Lynn created this whole event. It's why every speaker here is doing this, because it is painful and it is agonizing. And there are very few good reasons that justify, you know, the situation that happens when people are left with picking up the pieces. And sometimes, as we know, there are things we can't control. And there are things that we put in place and the plan doesn't go accordingly. But the point is that you're coming from an empowered place and a place of awareness, and you don't have to go through burnout and exhaustion and grief to know that you're not alone. And my free guide, enlightenedaging.org/guide. This is my gift for all of you. And
great. Thank you so much, Tanya. I learned a lot. You know, just, you know, simple questions to ask people, you know, where they're at and help them understand. Like you were saying, it's the basic, you know, the basic questions of engagement and trying to get them to talk more about where they are at and what they really truly want in their life. And even though they're, you know, like you, the people that you deal with are at the end of their life, but it's still their life, their fulfilling life, right? And how can they still live it fully, even though within their sickness or discomfort?
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I know you have to go because you have clients to help them with their transition or whatever situation they're in. So I appreciate you coming in. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for all of you adapting. I'm going to go to work and log in and watch you. So.
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you very much, Tanya.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. So did anybody have any questions or anything they have that's on their mind? Would they learn from that, you know, her presentation? Anything?
Yeah, this is Janelle. I didn't know that there were services before the services. If that makes sense, right? So yeah, so anyways, we're right in the thick of it. So it just kind of formulates some thoughts for me.
Yeah. In because the guy that my friend that passed, he was a vet, and I still have grief counseling services available to me through the vet services. So even though I wasn't his spouse or anything, there is a counselor that calls me about once a month just to see how I'm doing. And it's kind of funny because not funny, but it's kind of funny because she says, well, you know, we're always here if anything should come up. And I know, yeah, okay. And I think in some public aspects, she thinks because I'm going on doing all this stuff that I'm not dealing with my grief. And I said to her, you know, I sat with my friend until he took his last breath. So I feel I already got my closure, you know. I guess if somebody's never dealt with, like Tanya said, if they have never dealt with the person or had a conversation with that person, it would make a difference, obviously, you know. But yeah, so I think it's very, it's not to say, Janelle, that you're not or anything. It's just, I think we all grieve in a different way. And we just have to honor that way, the way that we grieve. We just have to honor it.
And I appreciate that, Marilyn. It's definitely helping the survivor, my mom, because I also had that closure, being able to take items out to my father at the hospital, during COVID. You couldn't see family members, but dropping care packages.
Right.
But with my mom, she's still stuck, and having to be that person, it's a lot.
Right. Yeah, there is a lot to it before and after, for sure. So Ron, you're the guy. You're up. Your
Yes, I
turn.
just wanted to make a comment also. I'd never heard of this area called palliative care. And I think as people are aging and they may not know about this resource that Tanya has to offer, which is huge in terms of, the emotional support, not to mention the medical support, and knowing that there is a trained professional available to support people going through this really difficult time. So I think it's definitely valuable for people to know. And, again, Mary Lynn, for, setting up this session for people to become aware of different resources. I had never heard of this myself either. So I thought it was very, very enlightening, for sure.
So would you like me to make you a co-host and you can share your...
Actually, I don't have slides. It's more going to be more of a conversation.
Okay, sure.
So again, Mary Lynn, thank you for inviting me to speak. I think, what you're doing is providing a huge service to a lot of people. And I think it's, we're dealing with issues that a lot of people don't want to think about, or even if they are thinking about it, they're difficult to deal with, especially emotionally. And it can be a roller coaster for sure. But I think that it's important for people to understand, what I think there's a movie I think Robin Williams was in, and he said, we're all terminal. We just don't know when we're going to pass. Right?
Yeah.
And it's true. Things can happen. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm part of the larger team, and we are literally on a crusade across the country in America to educate people about a product that can give them peace of mind and even hope in some ways about what the future might hold, or what people might have been are going through, or have been through, or family members have gone through. And so I think a lot of what's happened during COVID is people have become more fearful. Oh, what happens if I get sick? What happens if I pass away? What's going to happen to my family? Or what, of all these different situations. So what I'm going to talk about is what I do is I'm what I call a living benefits consultant. And what does that mean? And I'll give you a short story about how I learned about this whole area, because I pivoted my career several times. So living benefits, specifically medical living benefits, it's a life insurance product, but people don't have to die in order to use the benefits. And I'll go more into that. So again, it's all talking about giving people peace of mind for what might happen. So previously, when I was doing sales coaching, I met a woman. She was a life insurance agent, and she was having trouble finding clients. So that was my specialty. So I said, let's have coffee. And she was telling me more about what she did. She said, Ron, have you heard of living benefits? I said, what is that? She said, well, it's life insurance, but you don't have to die to use it. And I had life insurance. I've had it for over 10 years, with paying premiums month after month. And the primary benefit was that if I passed, my brother and my sons would receive the money from the life insurance policy. And that's all I knew. And being self-employed, I'd always in the back of my mind thinking, okay, when I had clients, I would have fees that they would pay me. And if a client left, I would replace them. But I always thought, well, what would happen if I couldn't work, or if I couldn't talk specifically, right? Because I would do phone consultations. So she said to me, Ron, well, if you had a living benefits insurance policy, if I got sick, I could take money out of the policy tax-free and pay my bills. And I said, are you kidding? And so we find that studies have shown that there's something like 200 million Americans who have life insurance, but only 2% have ever heard of this idea of living benefits. And I was part of that 2%. And I said, well, tell me more about how this works. And so I'll get into more of what that covers. So the short story was, I looked into the insurance company. Okay, what does this cover? How much is it? How long is it going to last? And I was so impressed that I applied for insurance with this company and was accepted. So I canceled my other insurance policy because it was basically a death benefit. They call it life insurance, but the primary benefit is when you pass, your beneficiaries will receive income or money tax-free. And so I researched the company. They're actually, in fact, one of the things that I had thought of, I'd never thought that I would be in the life insurance business. And, we sometimes, there's kind of a sick joke saying, well, if you're on an airplane and you don't want to talk to the person next to you, tell them you sell life insurance. And that'll end the conversation right there. And I say, probably life insurance salesmen, they may be in the same category as used car salespeople, right? And unfortunately, there are these images that people have of different professions, and they're not always good. So I had never imagined, that I've changed my professional career several times in the past, but I had never imagined it. But what really impressed me was this, not only the product, but the company that represents the product. And they were actually the pioneer who invented this idea of living benefits, insurance you don't have to die to use. And they're 173 years old, second oldest insurance company in America. And they're a mutual insurance company. And mutual is like a credit union. The policyholders, they don't have any shareholders. In other words, it's not a publicly traded company. So all the benefits go to the policyholders, like members of a credit union. They're very focused on their clients. And so I had a chance to see the CEO of the company. The company's called National Life Group. They're in Vermont. And he's even been written about in a book called Cause. And years ago, they found out that people were living longer, but they were living sicker. And many people were canceling their insurance policies, taking money out of their insurance to pay their medical bills. And some even couldn't pay all their bills and were going through bankruptcy. And they said, in the interest of their policyholders, they went to the actuaries. They're the people that crunch the numbers and determine lifespan and things like that. They're saying, what can we do for our policyholders? And the actuary said, well, we've been looking at this issue, and we would have paid benefits to these people anyway. So we actually came up with a way that people can actually receive money out of their life insurance before they pass. And so they created this whole category of living benefits, and they're revolutionary in terms of what they can offer to people in all different areas. So one of the things I wanted to cover is there are different myths about what life insurance is. And it can be a difficult topic. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, well, Ron, I'd like to find out, I want this amount of insurance for me and my husband, and we have adult kids, and I want to find out what you have to offer. And she said, my husband and my son, they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to talk about life insurance. They don't, because it implies dying, right? The typical, well, it is life insurance, so there is a benefit when people pass. But just the idea, is a roadblock, unfortunately. But she was open to it, as I was myself too. So one of the myths about life insurance is that it's very expensive. And I think a lot of people are hesitant to even consider talking to an agent or representative because they fear having this high pressure sales pitch, oh, you need it and so on. And, we've all, it's like, the stigma of going into a car dealership, right? And I think that model has changed quite a bit. but still, there are people who are fearful, even myself, even coming from a skills background. You don't want to go into a situation where you're going to be pressured into making a decision and so on. So that's one area that people are hesitant, and people are doing more online shopping, and there are benefits to that. There are also some other consequences which may not be as good, because it's a very personal, well, there are a lot of options and it can be confusing. So one myth is that a lot of people think life insurance is very expensive. Well, there are different types of life insurance. For one example is there's what's called term insurance. And again, this is primarily educational, and I will offer a free consultation at the end for people that are curious about their personal situation. So there are two basic types of life insurance in general. There's term insurance, and then there's permanent insurance. So a good analogy is term insurance is like renting a house. You pay your monthly payments. When you leave, that's it. So it's typically, it's very affordable. It can be as little as $25 a month, and it's for a specific amount of time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or 30 years. So it can be used, let's say if a couple has young kids, they might have a 20-year term insurance up until the time the child is, let's say, 18 or 20 years old, to cover their college or whatever, in case anything might happen to the parents. So it's like renting. You pay your money, and then if you leave the house, there's nothing you can take with you. Now, permanent insurance is like a savings account, where the money you pay for the permanent insurance builds and grows interest tax-free, which many people don't know either. And then there is a death benefit at the end, but there are also ways it can be structured to create a tax-free lifetime income. But the main benefit of permanent insurance is it does build cash value, and they're all different. So part of what we're doing is, educating between people about the differences between, we call it term and perm, term insurance, because it's for a specified term, number of years, and permanent. And I've talked to this one gentleman. He said, Ron, I have this insurance policy. Can you compare it? I said, well, what type of insurance is it? Is it term or permanent? He said, I don't know. And so whoever his agent was, or who explained it, did not explain it fully, because there are benefits to term and there are benefits to permanent insurance, and there are also limitations also. So one thing that the two primary things that affect the cost of insurance is age and health. So the younger you are, you could be in your 20s, and the healthier you are, the premium, the amount that you're going to pay every month, is much lower than, let's say, if you're 50 years old, overweight, and on medication. And if you have pre-existing conditions, you could be uninsurable, which means you can't get any life insurance. So we want to dispel these myths. And so what impressed me, not only about the company, was I'm part of a broker team, and they are very passionate. In fact, we actually call it a crusade to educate people about these living benefits. Because again, there are millions and millions and millions of Americans who are paying for life insurance, and the only benefit is when they die. And the good news is, like myself, if somebody has permanent insurance, in a lot of cases, they can upgrade their policy and include the living benefits at no additional charge. And it could be for the same premium they're already paying. So the three areas that we cover with this living benefits is people might die too soon, they might live too long, or they might get sick and have critical illnesses. So I've talked to people that might die too soon. I was talking to my son, he's 28 years old. And I said, hey, Greg, if you pass away, if you don't have any insurance, your mother and I are going to have to take care of your final expenses, the burial expenses. So I really encourage you to get some type of insurance. And he said, oh, Dad, you won't believe this. A friend of mine in high school, he was a couple years older than he was in high school. passed away suddenly. A young guy under 30 years old. And he said the family had to do a GoFundMe to pay for the final expenses. And what I've heard is that, and there are more people under 30 years old that are suffering from stroke in particular. And I think we all know that stress is one of the biggest causes of disease, because stress affects our immune system and affects our ability to prevent disease. And so people, young people may say, oh, I'm in my 20s, young guys, really buff, athletic, working out. Oh, I'm bulletproof, nothing can hurt me. And then boom, all of a sudden, there could be a medical issue, a car crash, an accident. Some people like extreme sports. Anyway, I won't belabor that point. But, and then there are people who unexpectedly pass away. I had a really sad story. One of our agents, she was a realtor and sold a couple their dream house. They had 3 kids. They loved it. And all of a sudden, the husband passes away from an illness. The wife wasn't working. And so the wife called my friend. She said, oh, we have bad news. My husband passed away. We have to sell the house. And she said, I can't deal with this. It was too emotional for her, because she knew the husband, she knew the wife, she knew the kids. And they said, no, we trust you, please help us. So she helped them sell the house. It was in the Bay Area. Unfortunately, they had to move. He didn't have any insurance. They had to move to Texas and live with relatives. So life can happen. There's that saying that life happens while you're making other plans. And we think we're going to live forever. And then as Tanya was saying, there are issues that may come up in the future. And we need to, for me, I want to go into the future with my eyes wide open. What happens if, and prepare for it. And also let other people, my loved ones, know, okay, these are my wishes, as you might say. So that issue, so one is people may die too soon. And the second issue is people may live too long. So the good news is, with the advances in medicine, we are living longer, but we're not living healthier. In fact, statistically, they say that 1 out of 2 men is going to suffer cancer in their lifetime, and 1 out of 3 women will suffer from cancer and survive. The good news is people will survive. But one of the biggest causes of bankruptcy and foreclosure is medical debt. And I've heard stories of cancer treatments costing $1 million. And what people don't know is just because you can't afford it, that debt is not going to go away. In fact, medical organizations and hospitals have collection agencies, and they are going to go after that money, and it's not going to be pleasant. I've heard horror stories of people being intimidated and so on. And this is after, let's say, a loved one may have passed away. So again, the death protection provides for coverage, for medical expenses. Now, what happens is too, when people live too long, one of the biggest concerns people have is, am I going to run out of money when I retire? And of course, sometimes people wonder if they can ever retire. With the cost of living, they say that the average retirement that people have saved for is $15,000. And how long is that going to last, especially in the Bay Area? So one of the benefits, so Max, I'll cover, so if people live too long, there are health issues. What if I get sick? Especially during the COVID era, that was a concern. What if I get sick, but I don't pass away? And so with our living benefits, it covers 4 major areas where people can file a claim and the company will pay the claim for these 4 specific medical conditions. So let's say, for example, if somebody had a $1 million insurance policy, which means if they passed, their heirs, beneficiaries would get $1 million, and the money is literally tax-free. That's something that a lot of people don't realize. There's no tax taken out of it. It's part of the Internal Revenue Code. So if somebody suffers from a terminal illness, let's say the doctor says, oh, Ron, I'm sorry, but you're going to pass away in 24 months. I could file a claim. And if I had $1 million policy, I could literally get paid by the insurance company $1 million tax-free. And we had one of our agents actually was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he literally got a check for $794,000. And he was well enough at that point, he said, you have 24 months. He could have used that money for anything, maybe gone through his bucket list, taken a trip around the world. But what he did was he found an experimental stem cell treatment that would generate his own bone marrow. And he went through the treatment, and today he's 99% cancer free. And he actually went back to work as an insurance agent. And somebody said, well, why'd you go back to work? You had all that money. He said, no, this insurance policy literally saved my life. Because if he had not had that money to go through that treatment, he would have passed. That was the doctor's diagnosis. So another area is chronic illness, which is similar to long-term care, but it's not long-term care. So if somebody cannot do 2 out of 6 daily activities, it could be bathing, dressing themselves, transporting themselves, continence, they can file a claim, and they can be paid money every month for 4 years and 2 months, up to 50 months on $1 million policy, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 a month. And they could literally, and it goes directly to the client. So they could hire a friend or relative to come and take care of them. It doesn't have to be a licensed caregiver. It doesn't have to be a licensed facility. And it doesn't have the limitations of long-term care policies. And so all of these benefits are included at no additional cost. Another area is critical injury. And whenever I hear about these 3, 4, 5 car crashes on the freeways here in the Bay Area, I'm thinking, okay, that is a very likely possibility for critical injury. One is traumatic brain injury, also covers coma, paralysis, and severe burns. So again, people can be paid up to 70% of their policy, paid directly to the client for medical bills, treatment, whatever. But the main thing that caught my attention is critical illness. And what's covered under critical illness is heart attack, stroke, cancer, major organ transplants, end-stage renal failure. And if somebody is diagnosed with these conditions, again, they can file a claim and literally be paid money directly to them to pay their medical bills or whatever. And so as I look ahead myself, I do as much as I can to stay healthy. I go jogging, do meditation, mental exercise or training, you might say. So again, one of our messages in this crusade is giving people hope, saying, hey, we can help you not have to worry about these specific financial issues that may come up. So that's the area of getting sick. And also too, there are some little known features of life insurance that not only do a lot of Americans are not aware of, but even financial advisors. For example, life insurance is not only for death protection or even these medical benefits, because there is a way somebody can put, and this has to do with the cash value growth of of money inside a life insurance policy. And one thing that I learned in one of our trainings with our broker is that life insurance was created by the wealthy for the wealthy. And so there are provisions in the IRS tax code that favor life insurance. One is money can be put in after tax money, and the money grows tax-free. People can take loans out of their policy, again, tax-free. And it can be also set. So let's say if somebody has a policy and they don't get sick, they don't get injured, They don't have any chronic or critical illnesses. Well, and they're still alive. Well, it can be structured so they can literally set up a lifetime tax-free income. And if they do pass away, or when they do pass away, whatever is left in the face amount or death benefit can go to their beneficiaries. And if somebody is high income, wealthy, high net worth, they can create a way to transfer that wealth to their family, and it's passed on tax-free, and it doesn't go through probate. So we are educating, average Americans, but also high income earners. Here's a way and also the way it grows at an average of 5% a year, up to 9%. And it's based on an index of the stock market, but it's not dependent on the stock market. So Warren Buffett has said there is a crash coming. We just don't know when. And so if people have their money in stocks, mutual funds, an example is, I think back in 2008, when there was this sick joke that said, oh, my 401k became a 201k because of the big crash in the stock market. Well, that's not going to happen with money inside a life insurance policy, because we have a saying that zero is your hero, because it can grow up to 9%, but it will never go below zero. So if the stock market takes a big dip, it will go flat. So there's no interest during that time, but it will never go negative. And also one of the things too, we're educating people is if people have a 401k, especially people who may be unemployed, or may in Silicon Valley, people have had multiple jobs over a period of, let's say, 2 or 3 years is an average stint at any one company. So a lot of people don't know that when they take money out of their 401k, they're going to pay income tax on that money. And we all know that income tax, all taxes of all kinds, especially income tax, federal and state, is going up. We just don't know how much. Somebody may say, oh, I have $500,000 in my 401k. Okay, well, take out 30% of that. When you start pulling the money out, you're going to have less money than you think. And also, if the market drops, that 401k could become a 201k or a 101k. So if people have older 401ks, we can show them how to transfer that money into a product where there's no risk and there is also growth. So just in conclusion, our team is on a crusade to educate people. And one of the things that impressed me, since I have a sales background, is their marketing strategy. The company and the team that we're part of, we're not focused on selling life insurance to people who do not have life insurance. A lot of major insurance companies, that's their strategy. You hear commercials on the internet, radio commercials, and so on. They're trying to sell insurance to people that don't have insurance. Well, our strategy is to educate 98% of people who already have life insurance on how they can upgrade their policy. And again, in many cases, pay the same premium every month, or even transfer some of their cash value. They can actually convert it from one company to another and not pay any penalties, and enjoy these living benefits at no additional cost. And so that impressed me. In other words, we're not just about selling policies and just take the money and run. This one person I was talking to, I said, well, what type of insurance do you have? And he said, I don't know. So that told me that whoever sold them that insurance never kept in touch with them after they sold them the policy. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. And so our company, we are very firm on reviewing policies with people every year, because a year goes by, people's lifestyle changes. Maybe they're single, they get married. Maybe they have their first child. Maybe they're looking at retirement. So just the philosophy of the insurance company and also the broker I'm with really impressed me. And so I feel very proud of being able to educate people these benefits that can really give them peace of mind. I know for me, it gives me more peace of mind. Now I'm still self-employed, but if anything happens, I know that I have a resource and I don't have to worry about declaring bankruptcy or what's going to happen if I can't pay my bills or my rent, let alone any death benefits. So again, they offer a complimentary 30-minute consultation. It's not a sales call. It's more about understanding where people are if they don't have insurance. What needs do they have for themselves or people who depend on their income, no matter what their age is, or if they're older, worried about issues of outliving their retirement. We just want to provide people options. It's not a one size fits all. It's very dependent on their personal situation, and of course, also age and health. So Mary Lynn, I want to thank you again for inviting me to share this information. Whoever's listening, I hope you'll listen to it, because it definitely changed my whole perspective on this industry. In fact, our crusade is to disrupt this insurance industry. It's 200 years old, and there are other companies that offer, quote, living benefits, but specifically our company has medical living benefits, which is a whole different aspect of protection. So we are literally on a crusade to educate people about what this product can do for them while they are still living. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Ron. I was just going to say to your story, Mary Lynn was saying, a friend of mine was saying that she says quite often what happens is that people get insurance, and maybe like she was saying, one of her clients that passed away, one of her clients passed away, and he had insurance, but his wife never met the broker and no way to find him or anything. And what happened is that she just said that she had to sell her house, and she had $1 million house, had to sell it and move it into a 2-bedroom apartment with her 2 kids, even though these kids lived well off. She said because she could never find the agent that sold them the life insurance.
That happened to me also. One of my relatives, his wife passed away, and I was trying to help them find the policy for the wife who passed away, because it was worth a lot of money. But you're right, it happens. Even if they can't file a claim, the money's gone, and they've been paying year after year after year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's just about, like you were saying, you also have that personal relationship with your agent. And like you were saying, so many people sell you a policy and you yet to never to hear from them again.
That's human nature, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much, Ron. Thanks for the living benefits, because I didn't know about the living benefits either. And I just thought it's a key component, especially if you're a child in your 30s or 40s, you're concerned about your parents and how can you provide for them.
Exactly. Thank you again for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Ron. We'll talk later. Thank you. And so I'm going to bring up Jeanette Marsala. She's an estate planning attorney. So I have to be careful what I say this morning, because
oh, don't worry about it. I'm very good about taking the attorney hat off. You're good. But
I don't want to overstep.
You're good. So I'm guessing we're okay to start a little bit early for everyone?
Oh yeah, sure. I'll make you co-host, and you can go ahead. Can I just yeah, no, it's okay. I'll be good. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I got it recording. So
all right, so let me share my screen. So hi everyone, my name is Jeanette Marsala. I am an estate planning attorney. So I just have kind of a broad overview presentation for you today, really just on getting your estate in order, which, as I said, is just really an overview of estate planning. So we're not going to go into too in detail Obviously, at the end, I'll give you a link where if you want to schedule a consultation with me to discuss your specific situation in detail, I'm happy to do that for you guys. But otherwise, I just want to give you guys an overview of estate planning. What should you be thinking about? Little bit about me, kind of my credibility, so to speak. I graduated law school originally back in 2007. I started my career actually not in estate planning, but actually doing a lot of bankruptcy and commercial litigation. So 10 years ago, when the foreclosure crisis happened, I was representing all the banks and dealing with foreclosure. So I'm very familiar with how to transfer assets without getting the creditors upset at you. What is going to trigger a creditor action against you? What is considered fraud or not fraud? And, you know, I switched over to estate planning about 6 years ago. And so I really love working in estate planning. I get to work one-on-one with my clients. I get to proactively solve problems. I really do love what I do. I'm quite passionate about it. But enough about my background. Let's just dive into what you're all here for, about learning a little bit more about how to plan, how to avoid some of these pitfalls, you know, that Marilyn had mentioned in her experience of working as an executor, and some of the other people have mentioned. Like, what can you do? What's an estate? How do you put a plan together? Estate planning. Here's the kind of the boring legal definition that when you start reading it, your eyes just start rolling in the back of your head. Here's what it really means. What is estate planning? It's a plan that takes care of you and your family in case of a disability or death. In particular, what I handle is all of the legal documents, right? And so we'll talk about, you know, what documents you need and, you know, to really take care of you and your family if something should happen to you. I say disability, but I really mean kind of those life-altering disabilities where you're not able to make decisions for yourself, such as you had a heart attack or a stroke and you didn't quite recover. You got advanced stage Alzheimer's, or, you know, just all those situations that may happen where you need your family to step up and take care of you. Well, how can they do that? Do they have to go to court to do that? Are they able to go into your bank account and pay your bills for you? That's what the plan I'm talking about does. It will allow your family members to take care of you. And if something should happen to you and you pass away, how do they get access to all of that without having to go to court to deal with the stress of everything? So that's the estate planning that we'll be talking about today. So in general, you know, as Marilyn had mentioned, you know, what happens if you don't create a plan? What's the consequences? Well, the government, the California government, and this is true of anywhere, the government has created a plan for you. It's called probate. You probably will not like it. Probate was actually designed to pay your creditors. It was not designed to protect your family. So probate was designed to ensure the creditors get paid. So is there protections in there to make sure your family gets to keep your assets, that if you are married, that everything goes to your spouse or your minor children get to stay in the home? No, it's intended to protect your creditors. So it is not a friendly process. So one of the reasons why we talk about putting these plans together is generally for a lot of people, the motivation is going to be to avoid probate because we don't like this plan at all. So we're going to opt out and create our own. So just in general, the government's plan, probate, you know, as I said, it was created to benefit your creditors, not to help your family. That is not really a consideration at all. So during the probate process, you have the court, you have a judge overseeing every single step of the process. And people say, well, wait, why do I need to get a court involved? I'm married, I have kids, everything should just go equally. And that's true. The laws do say who's going to inherit it, but you still need a judge to oversee everything. You know, like sometimes you'll hear the stories about the lost heir, you know, so you get time for people to object. You get time for people to say, oh no, they weren't involved, or, you know, whatever reason, the court has to oversee every process. If there is no will and you didn't create a plan and you're going through probate, you're going to have to post a bond, just like you got arrested, you go to jail and you have to post that bond in order to get out. Same thing for your executors when they go through probate. They're going to have to post a bond. The court kind of does like a mini background check to make sure that they're not going to take the money and abscond with it to Las Vegas. You know, the court has to oversee everything. If it's the house, they're going to take a look at the house. They're going to value it. They're going to, if it needs to be sold, the court needs to approve the sale. You may need to publicize certain events in a newspaper before the court will order a sale. It's expensive, it's time consuming. Oh my gosh, is this stressful? Mm-hmm. On the other side of the screen there, you'll see what's a conservatorship. So you're still, if you don't recover, you didn't do any documents, you did no planning, how does your spouse, if they're not on title to something, how do they get access to your account? Let's say you're married and, oh my gosh, interest rates are great right now. I want to refinance, but my spouse has advanced Alzheimer's. How do you refinance the house? Unless you created a plan, you can't do those things. And so if you want to be able to do those things, your option is to go to court. It's the living probate. So the court is going to oversee the process, even though you're still alive. The court is going to, look at whoever applies to be your conservator, the person who's take care of you, and they have to post a bond. They have to do annual countings to make sure that they're not stealing your money. They have to make sure that the money is being spent towards you and not being spent towards gifts or other expenses. And again, the costs add up, and it's stressful because now you're going to court quite frequently, at least until the person passes away. Then you're dealing with probate. So we don't want to deal with this. This is super stressful. So the key to estate planning is to create the plan before you have to go through this. So the hard part of estate planning is you need to create it while you're healthy enough to make those decisions before you need it. Once you need it, it's too late to create it, right? I don't need my estate plan now because I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm fine. But tomorrow I get into a car accident. And now tomorrow I say, oh, I want my mom to go into my bank account and pay my bills. And the bank's going to look, well, is your mom on the account? No. Well, I'm going to need a court order in order to allow her into your bank account. Right? If I planned ahead, we can either add her to the bank account, probably not the best solution for other reasons, but maybe we create a power of attorney. Now she goes to the bank account and she presents that power of attorney. Now she can go into my bank account and pay my bills for me. But I needed to have signed that before she needed to use it. So that's kind of the trick with estate planning, is you need to create it now before you need it. So essentially, a good estate plan is going to do all of these things. These are what our goals are essentially in creating a good estate plan, because we don't like that government plan. We don't like dealing with that stress. So what can we do with an estate plan? You can pass on your values to the next generation, right? You can write letters of intent. You can say, to my minor child, I want them to go to college, so I'm setting aside money to pay for college. I want them to buy a house. You can pass on some of the values to the next generation. For younger people who with young kids, you're naming that guardian to take care of your kids. Protecting your loved ones from bad decision making. This is the classic. My child is 36 years old, but he still has a drug problem. Do you necessarily want to give him even $10,000 lump sum? Because guess what he's going to do with $10,000? Is he going to OD if you give him that type of money? Do we need to insert some protective language to ensure that he's not going to misspend that money? Or perhaps a child is married to someone and that spouse is going to try to take the money or going to do something with it. What can we do to protect our heirs or our beneficiaries, our loved ones, from potential bad consequences? If you have someone who has special needs, like you have an adult child who has Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, any type of special needs, we want to make sure that we protect them, because special needs individuals in general have government benefits that means that if they were to inherit something from, you know, your will or your trust, they may lose their government benefits. It was such a pain to get those governments to begin with, and now we're going to lose it. You know, so what can we do to protect those beneficiaries? And of course, we don't want to pay more taxes than we have to. We don't want to deal with the courts. We don't want to deal with these expenses. So what does that plan look like? So the basics of it, as I'll get into, is really, you know, 4 documents, really 6. But you have your will, a trust, an advanced healthcare directive, and a power of attorney. So generally, at a minimum, you know, we're going to be looking at which of these documents you need. So as I said, we're going to have a will, a trust, power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive. And then the last 2 on that list, it depends on what you have, but like if you have a life insurance policy, you're going to want to make sure that beneficiary designation is filled out and filled out correctly. You want to make sure you have backups listed as well, because you have a $500,000 life insurance policy and you named your wife, but she passed away last year. You didn't have a backup. Guess what's going to happen to that life insurance policy? That's now going to go through probate. So you always want to make sure that the beneficiary designation forms are completed and up to date. Likewise, if you have a business, you know, what happens to your business? So just real quick as an overview, the difference between a will and a trust. I get this question a lot. A lot of people don't understand this. When do you need a will? When do you need a trust? Here's what it is basically. If you have a will, right? This is a classic document that a lot of people are familiar with. This is the document that says who gets what when you pass away. If you just have a will, it does not avoid probate. The will is essentially an instruction sheet that you give to the judge to tell the judge what to do. So California state law generally says if you're married, most of your community property will go to your spouse. Your separate property will be split 50-50 between your spouse and your kids. If you have more than one child, everything is split equally amongst all your children, right? If you're not married, you don't have kids, then it goes to your parents, right? We have this kind of this family tree of inheritance. That's what the state law says. So in your will, you can say, you know what? I don't want to leave everything to my kids. I'd rather leave everything to charity. You can do that. Still does not avoid probate, right? It's essentially an instruction sheet that you give to the probate court. If you're married, if you just have a will, there's no planning for you as a couple. There's not, if I die first, everything goes to my spouse, and when my spouse passes away, when that second death happens, then I want everything to go to the kids. Can't do that with a will. It literally just happens when you pass away. So it's very limited. Obviously, you don't save on any taxes. There's no protections for your beneficiaries in general. You know, so if you have that beneficiary that spends money like water, they will be able to spend money like water. If you have a beneficiary, you know, a child who's under the age of 18, you may have to establish a guardianship. One of the benefits, as I said, is you get to choose your heirs. So if you want to leave everything to charity, you can do that in your will. If you have a minor child, you can choose who's going to take care of that child day to day. Those are some good things that wills are good for. So generally, it's going to be good for anyone who doesn't need to go through probate, right? That's when you're going to want a will. You have to go through probate if you have any sort of assets worth more than $150,000. So if you own real estate, you're going to want a trust, right? If you have an investment account, security, stock, anything like that, you're going to want a trust, because once you have more than $150,000 in assets, you're going to have to go through probate. So a trust, on the other hand, avoids probates. It avoids a conservatorship. We don't need the court involved. If we set up a kind of this private kind of documents that gives one the instruction how everything should be handled, how things should be distributed, how things should be taken care of. So trusts are great because they avoid probate, and that's what we want. If you're married, we can do a lot of planning with trusts. We can say, you know what, when I pass away, I don't want everything to go to my spouse. I want to just give her or him half of what I own, but I want to make sure that my kids from a previous relationship don't get disinherited, right? Think of Cinderella. Cinderella, if her parents had a trust, if they did some planning, Cinderella had both her parents. Happy story, right? But mom passed away. Okay, dad still loves Cinderella. Dad's going to take care of Cinderella. What happens though to Cinderella and her dad? Her dad remarries. Okay, that's fine. Dad is still around. Dad's going to take care of Cinderella. But then guess what happens in that story? Cinderella dad's pass away. Does the evil stepmom care about Cinderella at all? No. Does Cinderella receive anything from either what her dad owned or what her mom owned? No. It all went to the evil stepmother and she left it to her kids. That could be avoided had Cinderella's parents put together a trust. So there's a lot of protections we can include in a trust. It can either be very simple or it can be very complex. Like think of those billionaires and the trust fund babies. We can get very complex with our trust, or we can make it simple. They're very customizable, right? But in general, for most of our everyday people, a trust is going to be useful for parents of young children, anyone who owns a home, if you have assets, and the one thing to keep in mind, if you have a trust, you also are going to have a will. You're going to have both. Any estate planning attorney that prepares these documents will prepare both. When you have a trust, your will is going to be super simple. It just says, hey, if I own anything that's not in the trust already, I leave it to the trust. So that way we don't need to open a full probate because you didn't name a beneficiary on a retirement account, right? All you need the judge to do is enter one court order, transferring it to the trust, and the judge is done. That's worst case scenario, right? But ideally, if you have your trust put together and everything titled in the trust, you won't need to go through probate. The other two type of documents that you should look at getting into, and this is going to be good for everyone over the age of 18, is a power of attorney and an advanced healthcare directive. So the power of attorney allows someone else to manage your finances that's in your own personal name. And this document is good while you're still alive. So if I get sick and I name my mom as a power of attorney, she can use that power of attorney and go into my bank account. You want to make sure that the power of attorney is one drafted correctly and that you're naming people you trust, because it's easily abused, right? If let's say I named my brother and my brother is completely irresponsible with money, he can use that power of attorney, go into the bank account, withdraw everything and spend it on himself. And there's not much you can do after the fact. Yeah, I can bring a court action and try to recover the money, but the money is gone, right? So you want to make sure that when it's drafted and who you're naming, that there's a lot of trust involved. You are essentially giving them the license to steal from you. But it is an important document to have, because if you have any assets, such as a bank account, or you want to refinance, amend a trust, we're going to rely on that power of attorney. So this is good for everyone over the age of 18. Doesn't matter if you don't own anything, it's still a good idea to have this document. So a lot of people will say, I don't own anything, I rent, I don't have a house. You still need to put together an estate plan. Your estate plan in that case may be limited to just a power of attorney and your advanced healthcare directive, but you still want to get these documents put together. Advanced healthcare directive, this goes a lot with what Tanya was talking about earlier this morning. This is the document that allows someone else to make your healthcare decisions for you. So you get into a car accident, you suffer traumatic brain injury, who's going to make your healthcare decisions? There was a case that went up all the way to the Supreme Court. The Pope started commenting on it. It became a huge deal, the Terry Schiavo case. And it was a difference in opinion on what should happen between a husband and her parents. Because One didn't want to continue, like, kind of the feeding tubes, artificial nutrition, and the other did. So who decides, right? So this document, the Advanced Healthcare Directive, allows you to choose who that person will be. It allows you to specify what you would want in certain situations. So this also helps avoid a conservatorship. And it's also good for everyone, regardless of your health or your finances. Your beneficiary designation forms. So generally, most commonly, these are going to be used on any retirement accounts, your IRAs, your 401ks, pensions. Sometimes we'll have these. Life insurance policies will always have a beneficiary designation form. I know good agents like Ron will always make sure these are filled out, because this is essential to making sure that those accounts work. These assets are when you have a beneficiary properly designated, will pass outside of probate directly to your beneficiary. So if you have a life insurance policy, it's $1 million, and I name my spouse as a beneficiary. Once you make that claim to the life insurance agent or life insurance company, it will go to your spouse without having to open up a probate proceeding, without even a trust. So it's very important that these be named and completed correctly. You always want to name a backup. I mean, what if you and your spouse was in a car accident, you both pass away? Who's that contingent or that backup beneficiary, right? You don't want to, if you have kids, you don't want to name your kids when they're under 18. If you want to leave something to a minor child, that generally is when I'm going to recommend a trust. Because if you, let's say I'm a single mother, and I have a kid who's 5 years old, and I have a life insurance policy, and I want that policy to go to my kid, to take care of my kid. Well, I'm not going to name my kid as a beneficiary, because what's going to happen then is we're going to have to open up a probate guardianship to oversee that money until the kid turns 18. And guess what happens when they turn 18? The probate court essentially give them the check. So if I had $1 million policy and it goes through the guardianship process and my kid now turns 18, the court will write a check to my 18-year-old child. Here's your money. Do we necessarily want an 18-year-old receiving $1 million? Probably not. I know a lot of 18-year-olds would have so much fun with that, but would they be responsible in investing and saving and using the money wisely? Probably not going to be mature enough for that. So in general, if you want to leave someone to a special needs or an immature beneficiary, maybe we'll start looking at creating a trust to hold those proceeds. If you have a business, what happens to your business if something happens to you? If you divorce, you retire, you get sick, or you pass away, what happens to your business? Does it have an exit plan? So part of estate planning is going to be taking a look at your business. If you have a business that is providing for your family, that is the big source of income for your family, what does it mean if you suddenly get sick? What happens to that income? Does this stop? What's your plan? If you want to retire and you have a business, well, is your goal going to be to sell the business? Because that affects how you build your business, right? So we want to plan for all of these things. If you have a business partner, can they afford to buy you out? Maybe we're going to look at life insurance to help them afford to buy out your spouse or your shares. So these are all different considerations that we're going to want to look at as part of your estate plan. Other considerations, kind of softer things. We talk a lot, we do a lot now online. I receive all my statements, all my accounts are all online. If something were to happen to me, does my family know my password to my email? Because all my statements are going to my email now. They're not coming by mail. It used to be you just wait by the mailbox and you just wait for the statements to come to see, where the assets are, but now it's all going to my email. And this, I think, goes to the conversation we had a little bit earlier in terms of, oh, I know my mom had a 401k, but I don't know with whom. right? And so part of creating your estate plan and prior to planning is making those accessible and findable for your family members or for your successor trustees or your agents, right? Because it does no one any good if they don't know what you have or where to find it. So a password manager is very useful so that they can get access to your email and to your online accounts. Same to your passcode to your phone. I had a roommate who was young. He was 27 years old and he got sick. I knew he was sick. You know, I knew he went into the hospital. He passed away overnight and his mom didn't know the passcode to his phone. And so she couldn't get access to his address book to call me. You know, so things like that we don't think about. Like we used to have phone books and address books. We write everyone's numbers down. And now when we switch over to smartphones, our smartphone is our address book. So do you have someone who knows the passcode to your phone? And I don't mean just adding their fingerprint or their Face ID, because Apple is, as you know, if the FBI can't get into it, don't expect a family member to, but getting the actual passcode. An emergency contact, you know, like in your cell phone in Apple, you can actually name an emergency contact so that if something were to happen to you, you know, you can actually create a medical ID on your phone so that the first responders can access it without knowing the passcode to your phone and to call your emergency contact. Does that emergency contact know where your documents are, or who to call, you know, the phone numbers to your family members and who to notify? Another consideration is funeral planning. That's another source of stress for a lot of families. You can actually pre-plan your funeral today while you're still alive, while you're able to make decisions. And I think there's a lot of value to that. I mean, just imagine when you have a loved one who passed away and you're making these decisions, it almost feels like you're being judged on how much you loved your family member or your friend based upon how elaborate that funeral is, right? And a lot of times you're like, well, I know my mom would have wanted something simple, but I have those different packages and I have to decide this. And of course, it's during the time when you're grieving and you're dealing with already so much stress. So sometimes to relieve that stress, it's helpful to, if you or your mother or your family member had planned this all out beforehand. You know, so it's almost like there's almost like funeral concierges where they will take over the planning for all the events. So you don't have to worry about creating the obituary, you know, to choosing the tombstone and paying for all that. It's already all taken care of. And actually coupled with funeral planning is like, what happens if you were to die on a cruise to the Caribbean? How much will it cost to bring your body back home? Right? These are all things that we don't think about day to day, but they're important to consider when we're putting our actual plan together. And as I mentioned briefly with your password manager, you know, your social media and online accounts, what happens to that? You know, if you have a Facebook account, did you create a legacy contact, you know, or is Facebook going to delete your profile and your family member lose all of your pictures? That's huge, right? You know, we want those pictures, but you need to make sure you choose a legacy contact, or otherwise, you know, Facebook, you know, you get another family member is like, no, we don't need it. And you lose the profile, you lose all the pictures. So you want to make sure that you look at what's going to happen to those as well. And then the inevitable, it's the clutter in our homes, right? When a family member passes away and we look in the garage and we just take one look at it and go, oh my God, I have to deal with this now. So, you know, as much as we can, you know, in terms of dealing with the clutter, it's nice to get that done as well. Generally, the key to success for estate planning is talk with your family members about this. They should know what your plan is. You know, it should not be a secret. It's one of the ways we can avoid a will contest or disputes or conflicts within the family, is just to talk about your plans with your families. Understand that you are the glue holding your family together, right? I often hear, oh yeah, my second spouse and my children get along great. They get along because you are there. They get along because they love you. And if you're not around, what's to keep them from continuing to get along? You know, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard from children, it's like, yeah, my mom thinks I totally love her new spouse, but no, I can't stand him. But they don't say that because they're trying to keep the peace. And then, you know, when mom passes away, you know, a lot of the conflict starts to come out. Much like Ron was talking about with the living benefits, start thinking about long-term care costs. And I recommend all my clients, regardless of age, to start thinking about this. Even if you're young and healthy, like, what does that plan look like? If you need care, if as you get older or things change in your health, what does that plan look like? How are you going to pay for it? You know, perhaps consider getting a life insurance policy with those chronic illness and critical illness riders. It can be a very flexible tool. You know, plan early. You got to create your plan before you need it. That's like the most mind-boggling thing I think about estate planning is most people think, oh, I don't need it now. I'm healthy. I'm young. That's the perfect time to put your plan together. You don't want to put together in the hospital because if you're in the hospital, what are the odds are you're on drugs that may affect your thinking or your ability to make decisions, right? And now you're dealing with that additional stress. And then if you don't have the capacity to make those decisions and you sign documents, they can be set aside. You know, so the key is to plan early while you're healthy. Get professional advice. We got a lot of professionals today who can help give you advice. You know, try to think holistically. I try to name some different areas here during today's presentation to give you some ideas of what to plan about. This is the kind of the comic I was thinking about in terms of clutter. You know, so the comic, it says, one day, son, all of this will be yours. And this just goes into like who you're naming as your successor trustee or your executor. I often say it's like, Mom, I thought you loved me. Why did you name me to do all this work, right? So this is why it's important to talk with your family so that they kind of know what's involved, where are things, what to do. In this instance, I totally recommend hiring a professional than dealing with this. I don't want to deal with that stress. So just to close it out for a quote real quick, estate planning is an important and everlasting gift you can give to your family. And setting up a smooth inheritance is not as hard as you think. So I do have a Facebook group. I'll put a link in the chat. If any of you want to schedule a consult, I'm happy to give you a 1-hour free consultation to discuss your situation in detail. And, you know, no pressure. It's really a lot of educational, much like this, but just talking about your specific situation. But you all are invited, whether you're interested in doing a consult with now, to join my Facebook group. I try to share little articles and tips, things like that, just to get people to start thinking about this, because this is an important topic. So thank you, everyone, for listening to my presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
That's great, Jeanette. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
It was good to kind of review of what I've done and okay, what more do I have to do? Or
it can be overwhelming and a lot.
Yeah, or just take a look at, okay, well, I'm good there, and I may call you anyway because I am having a problem with the business side, and maybe you can guide me or something or help me out there. But yeah, I think that was really good. I enjoyed that. How about anybody else? Any other comments from any other people?
Hey, this is Janelle again. Apologies, I'm still on the road.
No,
I just wanted to say thanks again for the information. We're in the thick of it for our circumstances, so I'll try to reach out. I just wanted to mention, you know, we may already be aware of this, but the hardest thing is getting everyone on board. And when everyone is not on board, but stuff still needs to be done, you know, it's really, really, really difficult. So thank you so much. I look forward to a possible consult. And yeah, I'm right in the middle of a mess. So yeah, maybe you can give us some insight. We already have a case and yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that's kind of, you know, getting the family meeting. And the nice thing about if you put a plan together, you don't necessarily need to get the buy-in of everyone. You get to choose what your plan looks like, right? So that it alleviates a lot of stress when you're planning for yourself and you lay out what you want, because how can you argue with Mom wanted X, Y, and Z to happen, and it's in writing, and that's enforceable. You can't really argue with that, right? You know, so that's one of the nice things about putting a plan like this together, is because you have kind of that roadmap, as opposed to probate. Now you're negotiating and trying to figure out. It's super stressful. I hear you.
Well, thank you very, very much for that, Jeanette. I enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody else in the call did as well, even though they're not saying anything.
It's fine. I hear it's a lot. It's okay.
I thought the information was outstanding. Thank you, Jeanette.
You're welcome.
Yeah, great. So I think we have a bit of a break because the next guy is going to speak till 1 o'clock. So you can come on back, or you can stay on the thing. I'll just remain open, and then if anybody wants to network, or continue our conversation about any other topics that are of interest to you, we can talk about. I was thinking of doing maybe a workshop or something about helping people start putting their stuff onto the paperwork. So if anybody's interested in that or not, you can let me know. And then that'll help Jeanette too, because all the paperwork will be in place, and when she gets it, she's, oh, okay, well, this and this and this, and anything you forgot, she could tell you. So just let me know if that'd be of interest to you or not, or if you know of anybody that would be interested in that. So I thought, no point doing that, creating a workshop when nobody's going to come. So because nobody's interested. So anyway, so just let us know. Any questions, anybody? No? Okay.
I think we overwhelmed everyone enough.
Yeah, I think we did too. Yeah. So I'm going to stop the video, or stop the, not my video, but stop the recording. And